On November 11, 2025, at exactly 6 o'clock a.m., a massive Russian armored convoy rolled out from occupied territory inside eastern Ukraine, 26 T-90 meters tanks, 34 BMP-3 fighting vehicles, and over 420 mechanized troops advanced in a steel column stretching nearly 2.5 miles. Their mission: break Ukraine's defenses before winter arrived. But Russia had no idea. They were driving straight into a battle designed for one purpose: to destroy them before they fired a single shot. Beneath the quiet farmlands along Highway M03 lay a hidden maze: more than 3,800 anti-tank mines, 600 magnetic triggers, and 42 remote charges, spread across 3.6 square kilometers of soil. And yet, Ukraine's entire plan nearly collapsed when a Ukrainian medical truck accidentally turned toward the restricted zone, just seconds from triggering the minefield themselves. Would the ambush still succeed? And could Ukraine strike before Russia's overwhelming firepower arrived? Join me and witness what happened next. At 6 o'clock a.m., November 11, 2025, the morning over eastern Ukraine was still dark, cold, and silent. But on the screen, inside Ukraine's forward command post near Seversk, something enormous began to move. A heat signature stretching nearly 2.4 miles long rolled across the radar. It wasn't civilian traffic. It wasn't a patrol. It was a Russian armored column. The numbers were staggering: 26 T-90 meters main battle tanks, 34 BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicles, 12 ammunition trucks, and more than 420 Russian mechanized troops advancing in one tight formation. Enough firepower to flatten a small city, enough armor to overwhelm an entire brigade. If left unchecked, they were moving down Highway M03, one of the most strategic roads in Donetsk, pushing toward the Ukrainian defensive line before winter mud could slow them. The Russians called this formation a steel corridor, but to Ukraine, it looked like a storm, one that could punch a hole straight through their eastern flank. Yet something felt wrong. To the Ukrainian officers watching from the bunker, the Russians were confident, too confident. They were driving through an area that had abandoned weeks earlier, an area where birds no longer flew, an area known on Ukrainian maps as the Silence Zone. And still, the column kept moving, unaware that the road ahead had been deliberately untouched, unpatrolled, unnaturally quiet, a place where nothing happened by accident. As the first tank crossed the old drainage canal at kilometer marker 112, Ukraine's operational commander gave a single order to his staff: hold. Let them enter deeper. The trap had not closed yet. The real battle had not begun. But the world was about to understand why. Ukraine had been silent for 17 nights. For 17 cold, mud-soaked nights. Ukraine's 128th Engineering Battalion worked in total darkness along the farmlands west of Highway M03. No headlights, no radios, only hand signals, thermal goggles, and the quiet clank of metal tools beneath the wind. Their mission was unforgiving: construct a hidden kill zone large enough to stop entire Russian armored regiment in one strike. The scale was shocking: a grid of 3,800 TM, 62 anti-tank mines, another 600 magnetic triggered mines, and 42 remotely detonated charges were buried across 3.6 square kilometers of soil, equal to nearly 900 football fields. Each mine was spaced with mathematical precision. Each lane of empty ground was crafted to look untouched, designed to lure Russian drivers into what they believed were safe paths. From above, Ukrainian UAVs circled silently, mapping every tractor line, every irrigation ditch, every shadow where a mine could be hidden. Their cameras fed coordinates directly into a secure bunker outside Seversk, where commanders watched the Russian column inch closer with each passing minute. But the preparation had not been perfect. At 5 o'clock a.m., a Ukrainian medical truck, rerouted after a civilian evacuation, mistakenly turned toward the restricted zone, only 148 feet from the minefield. The UAV operator screamed through the encrypted channel, "Stop! Stop immediately!" The driver froze. One more second in the entire mine maze. 3 weeks of work would have erupted prematurely. Crisis averted. The engineers reset their final charges, burying the last magnetic plate beneath a shallow layer of wet soil. The trap was ready, and now, as the Russian column entered deeper into the silence zone, the battlefield shifted from quiet preparation to lethal anticipation. Ukraine had built a weapon beneath the earth itself. All they needed now was the right moment to ignite it. At 7:03 am, the order finally came. Two words transmitted through an encrypted line. Every Ukrainian unit hidden around Highway MO3, hammer phase in an instant. The ground beneath the Russian column came alive. The first explosion tore through the silence. Like a thunderclap, a TM-62 mine buried under 18 inches of wet soil punched upward with the force of 12 pounds of TNT, ripping the tracks off a 46-ton 90 meters tank and hurling its turret 9 feet into the air. Before the dust settled, 3 more blasts ignited, then 5. Then a chain reaction of steel-shattering fire. Within the first 27 seconds, 11 Russian armored vehicles were disabled or burning. Flames shot 40 feet high, reflecting off the morning fog. Like pillars of orange glass, panic rippled through the formation. BMP-3 drivers swerved violently trying to escape. But the carefully crafted, safe lanes funneled them straight into magnetic mines. One BMP struck a magnet-triggered charge and detonated so violently that its rear doors were found 160 yards away. Above the chaos, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones swooped lower, feeding live thermal images to the command bunker. The operators watched as Russian commanders screamed into radios that no longer worked. The shockwave of the first blast had knocked out 4 of their communication relays, blinding the entire column. And then came the sound Ukraine had been waiting for, the rising whine of Russian engines reversing, grinding, spinning in desperation. But retreat was impossible. Not here, not now. At 7:09, Russia attempted to stabilize by calling in a BM-27 Uragan rocket battery from Crimea, capable of firing 300-pound rockets across a 35-kilometer arc. If even one salvo landed, Ukrainian forces along the tree line would be shredded. A warning flashed across Ukraine's command screen. Russian rocket launch preparations detected. Window 3 to 5 minutes. The battlefield suddenly tilted into a race against time. Ukraine had detonated the trap. Russia was preparing to retaliate with overwhelming firepower. The next moments would decide whether the ambush became a victory or a massacre. Realizing the danger, Ukrainian assault teams began shifting into Phase 2. Anti-tank squads sprinted forward through shallow trenches, grabbing their Stugna P launchers and preparing to engage surviving Russian vehicles. Before the rockets could fall, the minefield had crippled the column. Now, Ukraine had to finish it before the sky itself turned against them. At 7:00 am, with the Russian rocket battery preparing to fire from Crimea, Ukraine had less than 180 seconds to act. The minefield had broken the column, but it had not destroyed it. 40-ton machines were still alive inside the kill zone, bleeding fuel, burning metal, but still capable of returning fire. If Ukraine waited even a moment longer, the entire tree line where their forces were concealed would be erased by rocket blast. Phase 2 began with a single command: close, cut, move. 3 Ukrainian anti-armor platoons burst from concealed trench lines dug overnight along the western edge of the battlefield. They moved fast, low and silent, like shadows cutting through smoke. Each soldier carried either a Stugna P launcher, a RPG-29, or a portable U disruptor designed to blind Russian targeting systems. At short range, the first Stugna missile, launched at 7:00 am, it flew just 6 feet above the scorched ground, burning a thin orange arc across the morning haze, before slamming into the turret ring of 90 meters. Attempting to pivot out of the minefield, the blast punched through its armor and detonated the ammunition carousel inside. The resulting explosion shook the soil for 300 yards. Seconds later, 2 RPG-29 operators fired from a collapsed farmhouse wall. Their rockets tore into a BMP-3, trying to tow a damaged vehicle. The BMP erupted in a fireball so violent that fragments rained down on Russian infantry, who had dismounted seconds earlier, sending them scrambling into the open, exactly where Ukrainian marksmen were waiting. To the east, a Ukrainian EW team activated their jammers. At full power, the effect was immediate. Russian fire control computers froze. Thermal sights flickered. Target lock systems died. The armored column, already disoriented, was now effectively blind. At 7 o'clock a.m., the battlefield shifted again. A Ukrainian reconnaissance drone detected movement near a tree line north of the road. Russian surviving crews forming a defensive pocket, attempting to regroup for a breakout push. If they succeeded, Ukraine's left flank could collapse. The order went out: cut them off. A second volley of Stugna missiles roared skyward. Two hit an ammunition truck. The explosion sent a shockwave that shattered windows in a village 1.2 miles away. A third missile struck the Russian command jeep, trying to escape. It flipped onto its roof. Burning time was nearly up. At 7:40, Ukraine's artillery, guided by the drone that had spotted the rocket battery, fired 3 precision rounds. All 3 hit the Uragan launcher, destroying it before it could fire. The sky did not fall. Ukraine had beaten the clock and tightened the noose around the shattered Russian column. By 7 o'clock a.m., the battlefield along Highway M03 had changed from ordered movement to total disintegration. What had begun as Russia's confident armored thrust had devolved into a scene of wreckage, burning fuel and scattered survivors, trying to flee in every direction. The numbers told the story with brutal clarity. 28 Russian armored vehicles destroyed, 14 machines abandoned intact, and an estimated 160 soldiers killed, wounded, or surrendering in the aftermath. The armored column that had once stretched 2.4 miles now existed as a broken chain of blackened silhouettes rising through the morning haze. At the western edge of the kill zone, a BMP-3 crew climbed out of their overturned vehicle, coughing, shaking, blinded by smoke. One of them, a young conscript, no older than 20, stumbled toward the tree line, hands raised, uniform torn from the explosion. A Ukrainian medic, ignoring the gunfire still echoing nearby, stepped forward and offered him water. The boy drank with trembling fingers. The drone operator who captured that moment added a note in the mission log: enemy combatant status exhausted human. To the north, Ukrainian engineers moved cautiously toward the wrecks, extracting data drives, targeting modules, and battlefield maps from what remained of the Russian command vehicles. Inside one armored jeep, half melted but still intact, they found a binder labeled Operational Push, 18 hours. The documents confirmed Russia had planned a second wave of armor the same evening, aimed at overwhelming Ukraine before nightfall. Now that plan was gone. The rocket battery that was supposed to support the advance had been destroyed before it could fire. The convoy that was supposed to spearhead the breakthrough had been shattered before it reached kilometer marker 115. Russian radio channels, once filled with orders, had gone silent. Meanwhile, Ukrainian units tightened their perimeter, checking the minefield edges and escorting prisoners to a secure zone. Officers spoke quietly, almost reluctantly. Victory in war never felt clean, only necessary. One commander summed it up in a single sentence. Spoken over the radio, they attacked with machines. We answered with patience. The smoke drifted upward. The engines burned out, and the road fell still again. The ambush was over, but its lesson would echo far beyond the silence zone. By 8 o'clock a.m., the battlefield had finally settled into a unsettling quiet. Smoke drifted upward in slow spirals, mixing with the morning fog. As Ukrainian engineers stepped cautiously through the wreckage, they carried evidence bags, thermal scanners, and hardened laptops. Because the most important of the operation was only beginning. The ambush had destroyed machines. Now, Ukraine had to understand the minds behind them. Inside the first burned-out T-90M, engineers recovered a charred, half-melted targeting module. In another BMP-3, they found a functioning encrypted tablet showing Russian fuel routes and fallback points. But the most shocking discovery came from a partially intact command jeep buried under a collapsed tree. Inside were 2 military-grade SSD drives, a sealed packet of printed assault maps, and a tactical binder marked Operation Boreal Push. November 16, 2000. 25 3 directions. The documents showed something Ukraine had not expected. Russia wasn't planning one offensive. They were planning 3 simultaneous mechanized pushes, scheduled to begin less than 48 hours from now. Even more unsettling was a second file, labeled U/2025/Delta Transit. It contained detailed layouts of Ukrainian fuel depots, communication towers, and radar stations, locations Russia should not have known. A lieutenant whispered the words. Everyone felt there's a leak somewhere high. The discovery sparked an immediate response. Two SPU teams already stationed nearby moved on to the field to secure every piece of recovered intelligence. The minefield was dangerous, but the political minefield now opening in Kiev was far more explosive. Ukraine had won the battle, but the clues scattered across the wreckage revealed a darker truth. This operation wasn't just a Russian attack. It was the beginning of a deeper, hidden war, one that extended far beyond the silence zone. By 10 o'clock a.m., the intelligence recovered from the wrecked armored column had reached Kiev in a sealed black courier case. Within the hour, Ukraine's National Security Council convened an emergency inside an underground chamber beneath the government quarter. No media, no staff. Only 7 senior officials allowed inside. The documents laid on the table hit harder than the explosions on Highway MO3. Russia had obtained precise locations of 14 Ukrainian fuel depots, 6 radar grids and 9 military transit routes. Far too accurate to be guessed or gathered from satellites. Someone inside Ukraine had provided them. The Minister of Defense read the final page aloud. Operational data confirms internal compromise. Potential human source. Silence dropped over the room like a falling curtain. Then SBU's director delivered the real shock. A preliminary sweep of financial transfers showed $1.1 million moved through shell companies in Dnipro, Zaporizhia, and Kiev. Funds traced back to Russian intelligence cutouts. Worse, several payments aligned perfectly with dates when Ukrainian troop rotations were leaked online. A list of 9 high-value suspects appeared on the screen. Among them were a regional logistics officer, 2 municipal administrators from the Donetsk region, and 1 sitting member of parliament. 3 days earlier, that MP had stood on national television, promising that every inch of Ukraine is protected. Now, his encrypted messages, intercepted by SBU only hours before, showed coded communication with a Russian handler in Belgrade. The room erupted into tense debate. Some demanded immediate arrests. Others warned that acting too quickly could expose the investigation and trigger political chaos across the country. But one truth was clear to everyone present. The ambush at MO3 had uncovered more than a Russian assault. It had exposed a fracture inside Ukraine's own political core, one capable of doing far more damage than tanks or rockets. While Kiev reeled from the political shock, another storm was forming across the border. By 2:15 p.m. Moscow time, senior Russian commanders were summoned to an emergency meeting inside a fortified conference room beneath the Ministry of Defense. Phones were confiscated, doors sealed. A single order was given: explain the collapse of the MO3 operation. No one could. The figures projected on the wall told a humiliating story Russia desperately wanted hidden. 28 armored vehicles lost, 160 personnel dead or captured, a command jeep destroyed, and most damaging of all, classified campaign documents now in Ukrainian hands. The deputy chief of staff slammed his fist onto the table. How did Ukraine know the convoy's route? And why were our fallback points compromised? His next words were even more alarming. We suspect infiltration, either inside our ranks or inside theirs. Inside Russia's military blogging circles, usually tightly controlled, panic began leaking. 3 prominent pro-war commentators reported that the entire 3-day advance, planned for November 16, had been jeopardized by catastrophic misinformation. Within hours, all 3 posts disappeared. By nightfall, 2 of the bloggers had been detained. Western intelligence monitoring secure Russian channels detected sudden personnel shifts. 7 field officers removed, 2 generals reassigned, and 1 commander placed under quiet investigation for gross negligence. But the truth was simpler and far more dangerous. Russia didn't understand what had happened. They couldn't explain the precision of the Ukrainian ambush, and they feared the implications of losing sensitive documents that outlined a much larger winter offensive. In Moscow, silence wasn't a sign of control. It was the sound of a government trying to hide a strategic wound before the world realized how deep it truly was. By 5:40 p.m. Brussels time, NATO headquarters received the full intelligence brief from Kiev. Within minutes, an emergency session of the North Atlantic Council was initiated, screens lit up with high-resolution satellite images of the destroyed Russian convoy at MO3 alongside decrypted fragments of the captured operational binder. The reaction was immediate and seismic. For the first time in months, NATO analysts agreed on one conclusion. Ukraine has disrupted one of the largest pre-winter Russian offensives planned for 2025, the numbers spoken inside that chamber stunned even seasoned diplomats. 3 mechanized thrusts, up to 180 armored vehicles, and a projected 4,500 Russian troops scheduled to attack on November 16, all halted before the first shot of that campaign was even fired. The US ambassador delivered the next blow. Washington had verified that several Russian fallback positions shown in the captured maps matched coordinates collected by American reconnaissance aircraft. Weeks earlier, this confirmed the binder was authentic. Then came the political shockwave. Germany proposed sending an additional 145 armored vehicles to Ukraine. Poland pledged 21 counter-battery radar systems. Canada approved an emergency $1.4 billion military support package, the largest since early 2023. Inside the room, the Secretary General issued a rare statement. This ambush was not only a tactical victory, it was a geopolitical pivot. Meanwhile, the US Senate scheduled a rapid response hearing for the next morning. Senators demanded to see the recovered intelligence, especially the documents proving Russia had infiltrated Ukrainian infrastructure networks. By nightfall, every major Western news outlet was reporting the same headline: Ukraine's highway MO3 ambush reshapes winter war strategy. For the first time in weeks, Kiev felt the momentum shifting, not just on the battlefield, but across the entire political map of Europe and North America. By 7:20 p.m. Kiev time, the battlefield victory at Highway MO3 had already crossed borders, not through soldiers or tanks, but through pixels and radio waves. The first of footage of the ambush leaked onto social media, a 47-second clip showing Russian armor erupting in pillars of fire, one explosion after another, like a steel chain snapping in slow motion. Within hours, it hit 3.4 million views, generated 580,000 shares, and drew comments from every corner of the world. But the impact inside Russia was far more volatile. At 8:05 p.m. Moscow time, the Kremlin's internet monitors flagged an abnormal spike in traffic for the search terms MO3 loss. Destroyed convoy. Winter offensive failed within 30 minutes. All related keywords were blocked. Entire Telegram channels were taken offline. 3 prominent war bloggers who posted field reports contradicting official Russian statements were detained by internal security forces. Still, the censorship came too late. Families of Russian soldiers desperate for news began uploading private voice messages and fragments of intercepted calls. One mother released a recording from her son serving in the convoy. "We drove straight into a mine city. They knew everything. Someone told them, 'We're burning.'" The clip spread uncontrollably, gaining over 2 million plays on dark network forums before Russian censors finally caught up. Meanwhile, Western media turned the ambush into a headline storm. CNN called it Russia's most costly tactical collapse of 2025. The BBC highlighted Ukraine's precision planning. 17 nights, 0 noise, total devastation inside Kiev. Analysts were stunned by another trend. The Russian public reaction shifted from anger to fear. For the first time since 2022, polling data from underground Russian survey showed a staggering drop, a 19% in confidence toward the military's leadership. And then came the most explosive revelation. A respected Russian military blogger, known only by the handle Falcon21, posted a message shortly before disappearing. The convoy wasn't just destroyed, it was betrayed from the inside. That single sentence ignited a firestorm Moscow could not contain. It was no longer just a battlefield defeat. It was the beginning of a narrative Russia feared above all, that their greatest enemy might not be Ukraine, but the truth. By 11:45 p.m., while headlines raged across Europe and Moscow scrambled to suppress the truth, Kiev entered a darker phase of the operation, one the public would not hear about for weeks. SBU counterintelligence units, acting on the documents recovered at Highway MO3, launched a coordinated series of silent raids across Kiev, Dnipro, and Zaporizhia. No sirens, no televised arrests. Only unmarked vans, encrypted radios, and agents moving under cover of darkness. The first raid took place inside the apartment of a regional logistics officer. Hidden behind a false wall, investigators found $720,000 in cash, 3 Russian-made communication devices, and a handwritten note listing Ukrainian troop rotations for the upcoming month. The timestamps matched moments when Russian reconnaissance drones had suddenly appeared over Ukrainian bases. The second raid hit harder. Inside the home of a municipal administrator, from Donetsk, SBU discovered a stash of classified military transit maps, all printed on Ukrainian government paper, all stamped for restricted circulation. One USB drive contained encrypted video files, messages recorded by a Russian handler instructing the official to provide convoy routes, radar maintenance schedules, and satellite imagery requests. But the greatest shock came at 2:00 a.m. During the search of a sitting member of parliament, agents recovered a secure laptop running a hidden communication platform linked to an IP range in Belgorod. Logs show 127 exchanges with the Russian intelligence over the previous 8 months. Even worse, one message referenced the Russian convoy at MO3. Route confirmed no Ukrainian armor expected nearby. That single line explained everything. Russia had marched with confidence because someone inside Ukraine had blinded them to the danger. By dawn, SBU headquarters compiled its preliminary report. A coordinated espionage network has operated inside Ukraine since 2023. 3 officials were detained, 6 placed under surveillance, and more names were being added to the list. The battlefield ambush had exposed Russian armor. Now, the political ambush was exposing something far more dangerous. Betrayal from within, and Kiev understood. If one convoy had been sacrificed by Russia's misinformation, what else had been planned in the shadows? By 8:00 a.m., Kiev's parliament chamber was silent as the chief of defense placed a thick report onto the podium. Every delegate knew the ambush at Highway MO3 had changed the battlefield. What they didn't know until now was that it had also unmasked a threat far deeper than Russian armor. The general spoke only one sentence before opening the file. The convoy was not our true target. The network behind it was. Inside the report was a list of 12 arrested officials, politicians, administrators, logisticians, each tied to Russian intelligence through money transfers, encrypted messages, or classified leaks. One had funneled $410,000 from a Russian cutout bank. Another had submitted doctored troop reports directly to a military database. A third had provided Russia with coordinates for 6 Ukrainian radar stations, enabling precision strikes months earlier. Then came the final shock. Recovered Russian documents showed the MO3 ambush was a fragment of a massive winter campaign, one designed to break Ukraine politically, not just militarily. The espionage ring had been built to collapse cities from the inside. Ukraine had uncovered it just in time. The battle on Highway MO3 ended in smoke and steel, but the war it revealed, the war in the shadows, was only beginning.